Are you a runner who is struggling with injuries and you're wondering if cross training will help your running? Do you want to know if you would get the same benefits with cross training on a bike or an elliptical because of weather concerns, or if it's just not safe to run outside? Welcome to episode 254 on the Healthy Runner podcast, where we help you get stronger, run faster, and enjoy lifelong injury free running. And today is the official cross training for running episode. And I have with me the master extraordinaire when it comes to cross training, and that is Coach Kat from our Spark Healthy Runner coaching team. She's back on the podcast to share her expert tips when it comes to balancing cross training as a runner. Welcome back, Kat. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. And I always love that introduction.
Well, I feel like I say that a lot, that you're the master
Okay.
extraordinaire for a lot of things. But seriously, like cross training, guys, wait until you hear how passionate Kat is about cross training. Just to give you guys a little context, Coach Kat has multiple running coaching certifications, whether it's road running, trail running, triathlon training. She's got a lot. She's also a personal trainer, group exercise instructor, engineer by trade, scientist, farmer, Marvel lover, and that's just to name a few of her gifts and her talents. If you could give all the new listeners in our community, just give a little introduction, a little bit about yourself, and let us know, why you love running and why you're so passionate about cross training.
Okay. So if anybody doesn't know me, you're about to. You may learn more about me than you ever need to know. But I am an engineer during the day. I've worked at my company for 20 years. So I'm behind a desk, but then I am a group exercise coordinator where I'm in charge of a lot of classes at our local gym. I'm a group fitness instructor and a run coach. I also have hobbies such as farming, Marvel movies, you name it. I read a lot, and I read a lot of what I call useless information. But if you have a trivia question, you want me on your team. Just heads up, because I got a lot of information that's never going to be useful except in a trivia game. Um, and I I am a runner. I can't say whether I'm a road or a trail runner because I'm technically both. I've done road running. I've done 9 marathons. I've done 2 3-person relays, 95 miles, I may add, with my Coach Cat and Coach Lou together. Um, I've also done a lot of ultra trails. So I've done a mix. Currently, I do tend to favor trail runs. Um, and as a result, because I do a lot of longer distance races, I need to cross train. And one thing I want, before we even go on to the benefits of cross training, is that a lot of times people don't have a positive outlook of cross training. And I'm going to try to change their viewpoint on this. I'm going to try.
All right. Yeah. No, it is something that I have not favored personally myself, and I'll share a little bit about kind of my background, I'm sure, as we go along here during today. But if really you're listening to this and you're wondering if you can maintain your running fitness with cross training or how to implement cross training into your running, then this is the episode for you. So let's get started with cross training for running. And I guess the first question that's always a good place to start is like, what is it, right? Like, what is cross training? Like, can you define that for me, please?
I could, but we don't have all night. So, cross training to me is any activity outside of your main activity. So, as a runner, that is what we're going to call your main activity. Anything outside of that is technically cross training. However, for the purpose of training for a race or training to get benefits from it, I only count cross training that involves your cardio, your VO2 max. So while strength training, yoga, Pilates is technically cross training. For the purpose of this discussion, it will not be, I don't classify that as cross training. I call that either active recovery or strength training. And yes, by the definition, it's outside of your main activity, but I don't view that. It has to be a cardio activity that will work to help your VO2 max. And there may be some strength training in that, but that's the same as regular running. So I hope that makes a little sense as to what I think of cross training.
I'm glad that you brought that up because I would totally agree that it is more of the exercise or the forms of exercise that we're really working on our aerobic capacity, our aerobic system. And I love that you highlighted that you don't consider strength training, because I don't either, because strength training, I feel like, is its own
Mhm.
entity that every single runner should be doing.
Yes.
Every single runner doesn't necessarily need to cross train, but like strength training, some form of strength training is kind of a requirement. And I know strength training, and I would say maybe it's shifted, I feel like, in the running community, maybe in the last 5 or 10 years. But I feel like 15, 20 years ago, every single runner would consider strength training as like cross training.
Yes.
And nowadays, I would say, and we highly strongly believe in the power of strength training in order to improve in your running journey. So I love how you kind of segmented that out. And I know you mentioned yoga, Pilates as well, and forms of Pilates and, quite frankly, forms of yoga. If you're doing like power yoga, could be an element of strength training, but some of it could also almost be like in the recovery kind of bucket, restorative bucket. So I totally agree with you there. So we're really looking at kind of other forms of exercise that are working our cardio, our aerobic engine, if you will, to improve in the kind of aerobic capacity as a runner.
Yes.
Got it. All right. And what is this is probably like the answer everyone wants to know, is like, what is the best cross training for
Uh,
running?
okay. Now, I am going to answer the same way I answer everybody at the gym when they ask me what is the best exercise. The one you will stick with, the
Hmm.
one you enjoy. If you do not enjoy an exercise, I don't care how beneficial it is for you are not going to do it. So if you do not enjoy it, you are not going to stick with it. So the best cross training is one that you enjoy and want to do. And the only way to do that, find that out, is to experiment. So, generally speaking, people think of biking and swimming as standard cross training. But if you're a trail runner, power hiking, which I'll get into, you can do an elliptical, a rower. Rowing can be a cross training if you do it, to get, because remember, we're working on a cardio, so you want your VO2 max up there. And there are specific workouts that you can do at any one of these different sections to work on your VO2 max. But you really have to like it, because I don't care how fun, how good, say, an elliptical is. If you don't want to get on that elliptical, you're not going to do it. So that is something I tell everybody at the gym when they ask me, Kat, what's the best class to take? One you enjoy, so you can stick with it. So there isn't really a best cross training. What is best for you is going to be individual. And I'm going to get into the pros and cons, what each one can give you, what can't give you, expense, as we go along, so that you can make the best decision to go and try it.
Okay. Um, yeah, and I would say it probably depends, that answer that everyone loves, on what your goals are, right? Of the cross training. Is it, the goals of getting the heart rate up and getting, a real challenge to the cardiovascular system? Or is it to maybe work on your lower heart rate zones and get some like zone two, or some steady state like cardiovascular exercise? Or is it really to like let the legs recover maybe from like the weight bearing activity that we have as a runner? So I guess, right, like
For
that would
me,
probably depend.
for me, the best cross training is one that will get you that VO2 max. the benefits you get from running without necessarily the impact on your body. Because as we go on, and I was waiting to say this, but a lot of road runners view cross training, the bike, as kind of punishment when they're injured, when in reality, it can be the one thing that prevents you from being injured. So I'm going to go into that a little later about the mental aspect of why people are
Hmm.
resistant to it and try to knock some of those resistance down. I may have an uphill battle with some people, but I love a challenge. Um, but the goal is to get you that training. And as we go along, you'll see when specifically, if you're training for long events, if you have a lot like 6 of training, why adding cross training will maintain and get you ready for a race or an event, but keep you injury free from the impact that you could have from just pounding of running.
Okay, so you're talking about it from more of a preventative standpoint to limit the
Yes.
amount of impact that we have as runners because our foot's always on the ground.
Hmm.
We have like 6 to 8 times our body mass, depending upon what study that you look at. And do you mind just defining, because you mentioned it, I think like 3 times now, VO2 max, like what that is? Because I know you mentioned that would be
Basically,
like a goal of cross training.
I'm trying not to get too technical with it, but it is what your body, almost what your body can sustain at a high level without like dropping, almost like where you're so exhausted, where you're improving your cardiovascular at a high level. So like sprinting sometimes can cause that VO2 max. You want, as you get better and better conditioned cardiovascularly, you can go longer at a higher level and your VO2 max improves. So it's basically cardiovascular function. It lets you run for longer. The better your VO2 max is, it lets you run longer with less effort. And I can
Nice.
get into the whole science, but
Yeah.
it just basically lets you run longer, harder, faster, but with less effort, if that makes sense.
Yeah, so we're becoming like more efficient at like oxygen exchange, right? Like
Yes.
that's going from like your lungs and into your bloodstream, and that's going to your muscles, and you're more efficient at exchanging oxygen. You can last longer, like you mentioned, or run faster.
I
Okay.
just went to the
S-
bionic man. I don't know. If you're in my age group, you might be able to understand why I just went to the bionic man, the $1 million man. But $1 million bionic man. Oh my god. Okay.
I
All
don't get
right,
that
never mind.
reference.
All right, it's an old reference. It's probably a 70s, early 80s reference. Come on, people. If
All
you're
right,
listening to this,
I
back
was
me up.
only a young
I don't want
whippersnapper.
to go there. Let's not go but age.
Hey, I just turned 45, so but
If
yes, I was
anybody
born in
does
79.
want, like my runners, when I work with my runners, I discuss in detail what VO2 max is and how for them to be efficient. So if anybody does ever want to reach out and ask me specifics about that, I will give you all the science you want. But a lot of times I see people's face glaze over when I start talking about that. So, but as a coach, I work with my runners on some of them really in depth with this.
Okay. All right. But we're basically working our cardio system, is what you're saying. And all right. And what equipment do we need? What equipment's required for cross training? Need anything special?
If you're going to use a bike, you can go to a gym if you have a membership to a gym. But if you don't and you just have a road bike or a trail bike, there are stabilizers that you can order. And I know I have a client who she uses it in her apartment, in a small apartment. It basically locks your road bike into place so you can use your road bike as a spin bike. So if you happen to have a spin bike and they're inexpensive, um, not the spin bike, but
Road bike?
the road bike, if you happen to have that, or you can go to the gym. And I know that is a cost, but some gyms can be as low as like $5, $10 a month. So you do have the option. That is what you would need. You do not need special shoes for biking, no matter what the spin instructors tell you. Sorry, Latoya. You do not need any special shoes. If you're swimming, you obviously, that's another version. You need a pool. But equipment, you just need a bathing suit and a cap and goggles. Not everybody has access to a pool. I don't really with the time schedule. If any other equipment, a rower or an elliptical, a gym would be your best option. But if you don't have any of that equipment and you don't want to join a gym, there is the secret weapon of power hiking, which basically all you need is a good pair of trail running shoes. That would be all you need. You could go find a trail. And we'll talk about power hiking um,
Okay.
a little bit more. So you don't need a lot of equipment. If you have access, and most people have access to a gym, most people have access to a bike, but I don't want to assume because it is another expense and people may not want to spend it. Then there are options outside, such as power hiking, where all you need is a good pair of, hiking boots or shoes.
Okay. All right. Or even, how about if someone is in a warm weather climate, if they're in the southern part
Yes,
of maybe even a pool, right? Like community pool,
a
they can
community
do that.
pool. If you're in Florida, you could go swimming in the ocean. Most people have access to cross training if they really want to. But again, it may be an expense for some people. So I always keep that in mind when I am talking about that with clients.
Hmm.
I'm like, what do you have access to? And usually I can find something that they can do.
Yeah, and you mentioned, you're both like a hybrid athlete. You're a road runner and you're a trail runner. And
Yes, yes.
is cross training different for like running on the roads versus trails, or
Um,
should trail runners and road runners look at it differently?
no, but they do. Um, road
In what
runners,
way?
road runners are resistant. Road runners are resistant. They want to run. They want to run. They do not want to do any other activity but run. Trail runners, we're like, oh, we don't have to run. Yay, let's go ride a bike. Um, and I'm not making that up. Okay, that's a stereotype I'll give you, but for the most part, road runners are more resistant to cross training. And I have a couple of theories on that, and I've asked some people, but they would benefit more from, say, a bike workout because it's not too off. You're still on the road, maybe. The bike workout is probably within their comfort zone. If you're a trail runner, you're going to be doing more biking and power hiking just because that's your comfort zone. So it is going to look different for a road or a trail runner, but only in what you, again, it goes back to what you prefer. And a lot of times I find that people, the more resistant people are, is they're afraid that they're going to lose their running edge if they do cross training. And I hate to say this, but a lot of people, it doesn't look glamorous on Strava. You know, a lot of people like to see their stuff on Strava. They like to see their numbers. They like to see how many miles they ran. And this will drop your weekly mileage. And for road runners, that freaks a lot of road runners out, but it shouldn't, because you're not going to lose any benefit. You're actually going to gain potential gains from it. Whereas more trail runners, from my experience, are not so focused on the distances as they are on time on your feet, usually. But again, everything is individualized.
I see. And you kind of mentioned some benefits there. What are the benefits of actually cross training for running?
Oh, glad you asked. I thought you would never ask. Um, it will make you stronger, and it can potentially make you faster. I don't want to, and it'll make you potentially more successful. And I say potential because every result is different. Um, but to make you stronger, if you're riding a bike and you're on a spin bike and you're using incline and resistance on the bike, your legs are going to get a good workout. You're going to feel like your legs are really, really working it. So you're going to get a strong, almost like a strength training. If you kind of take that resistance off and you start going faster, you're going to get that more of that cardio training. So you're going to be working, and if you combine the two in one workout, you're getting both your strength and your speed increase if you combine them in one workout. Now, it's going to feel a little different, but if you really push yourself on the spin bike and you get off, your legs are going to be sore the next day. You're going to
Hmm.
feel sore the next day. You know, so that will help you get stronger. And again, you get faster and stronger by strength training. So even though this isn't strength training, you are increasing your strength in your legs and your calves and everything that you need by doing a spin bike or power hiking up a hill. Now, I haven't really discussed power hiking, but that is basically when you pick a hike. It can be technical or not technical, which means a lot of stones, rocks. The more stones, rocks, the more trippy hazard. I call it trip hazard. The more technical it usually is. But it can also be elevation. Power hiking is you go as fast as you can without running or falling, and you go constant. You don't stop. You're going to be out of breath. You're going to be sweating. Your legs are going to feel on fire. Your glutes are going to be killing you if you're going up hills. That's power hiking.
Okay,
It's
I
fun.
can actually. I don't typically I don't do hiking, but I do remember in St. Thomas this past summer, we found a trail and we thought it'd be nice do a little family hike. And 2.5, 3 hours later, my girls were not happy with me, and it wasn't a fun family hike, as we got a little lost, and it was a longer hike than we had expected, but that I would say I was power hiking because I just remember my heart rate elevated. It was we were working. There was a lot of elevation, a lot of stones that we were going up, a lot of like roots that we were climbing. There was times when we had to like hang on to ropes,
Yeah,
and
I,
yeah,
I, I'm thinking more go up the tower trail of Sleeping Giant for you, for a beginner, like people who aren't trail running. Go as fast as you can up and down up that tower trail, which is about 1.5 miles. Get up there. See how fast you can get up there without running, because the goal is not to put a lot of impact like running. You can run up it, but no, power hike, like walk as fast as you can. I do that with the yellow trail over there. And if you know the yellow trail, that one is brutal, but um, that is going to overall just make you a better athlete, because remember, runners are athletes. So if you're trying to be a better athlete, stronger, faster, again, I'm referencing the $1 Million Man, um, it's that will help you. It will get you there, believe it or not. And I'm eventually going to get to my story
yeah.
so that you guys really know I'm not just talking.
And the power hiking too, I could see that being extremely helpful for especially working the posterior chain, so like the glutes, the hamstrings.
If you have a hilly course, whether it's road or trail, it doesn't matter. If you have a very hilly, you know, race, you power hiking can save you, because you're going to know how it feels to go up those hills. You're going to be like, "Oh, okay, my body knows this. This is muscle memory. I've been doing this before." Okay, it just power up the hill. You don't have to run up the hill to get up there fast. You'll get up there faster power hiking than most runners. And your body will be like, "Okay," and you'll conserve your energy and your VO2 max will be up there. So that is, something that whether you're road or trail, you can benefit from.
Yeah, I remember actually Coach Lou teaching me that years ago while we were running the Surftown half marathon, and there were some hills at a certain section, and he's like, "Yeah, just stop running. Let's walk this steep part," because he's like, "You're going to conserve more energy
I don't know.
than."
I never, unless I guess if it's a 5K, or I guess there are times when you want to run up a hill, but for the most part, you're not gaining anything. You're just going to be, because I see people run past me and I'm like, okay, I'll catch you in about, give it a half mile. I'm going to be powering past you and you're going to be fatigued. So
Right.
I'm like, yeah, half mile. There you go.
Yep.
Not that I'm competitive, but there's a little bit there.
No.
Just a little. Don't try to compete with me. I will try my best to destroy you. I'm sorry.
Uh-oh. Uh-oh.
It's one of
If
those things.
anyone sees Coach Cat on the course,
Oh
watch
my
out.
god.
He's coming after you.
I can be wandering aimlessly, and all of a sudden I see somebody who I think I need to catch up to. There's some that miraculous speed from somewhere. I
That's
can't
it.
let
They're
them.
done.
Yeah.
All right. So benefits are really, you kind of outlined one earlier today on that you are kind of decreasing the weight bearing forces, impact forces of running, but then you're also helping yourself physically to become stronger and faster by working on the strength element, we'll say, of like cardiovascular fitness,
Yes.
where it's more challenging for your leg muscles than it is for like the cardiovascular aspect. Am I understanding that correctly?
Yes. And they
Okay.
work hand in hand.
All right. And does cross training help with recovery?
Yes. Now, here is where recovery is a very tricky thing for people because they worry about recovery. But if you know, if you train at a really high level for a very long time, you're going to need, at some point, your body's going to say, I need to stop. I need some recovery. So it can be your secret weapon to lower that impact while training, but at the same time, not lower your cardio conditioning. And I've said that before, but I'm going to kind of give you now. I'm going to talk about, and I don't usually, I'm a little uncomfortable because I don't like to talk about myself in terms of my racing, but I trained for a 12-hour ultra, which was a combo of trail and road in for August. So I spent 6 months training for this. And my training involves 6 days a week of training. Okay? So 6 days a week is a lot of days to train. And I couldn't do that running, only running. A, my body would break down. B, mentally, I would be a basket case. So I incorporated, my coach did, incorporated cross training, which involved a lot of bike workouts and um, a lot of bike workouts and some power hikings. The bike workouts, even though I was out of breath when I did them, and they were very specific workouts to get your cardio up there, I didn't have that fatigue that you might get on the legs the next day from a long run.
Hmm.
So I was still getting the cardio effect, but my legs, I woke up the next day and my legs weren't sore. My hips weren't always sore because, even if you're taking all the precautions, and I don't recommend people train for 6 days a week. Mine was an extreme case because I am going into the heavier distance ultras. But even if you're training 5 days a week, 5 days a week of running, your hips, your ankles, your knees eventually are, even if you do everything right, are going to be sore. I can honestly say I did not have any soreness during my training cycle. And I chalk it up to cross training on the bike and power hiking. And I will talk about um, my specific workout, but we'll get to that in a second. So I did my 12-hour ultra in August. I didn't tell anyone this, but I had a 24-hour ultra 8 weeks later planned. So for 2 weeks right after my 12-hour one, I did minimal, just bike easy. And then I transitioned into a full six day a week training again at a higher intensity than I've ever trained in my life. And I know people say go from half to a full marathon, the training is different. 12 to 24-hour race, the training's insane. I'm talking 6-hour runs. So versus 3. So cross training was the only way my body, I'm not a spring chicken. I'm not giving my age, but I'm not a spring chicken. I couldn't run the amount of time it would take me. My body wouldn't hold up. And I successfully did this 8 weeks later, 14 more miles than I've ever run in my life, and almost 6 hours more than I've ever run in my life. I'm not giving specifics, but that's a lot. And no injuries, no aches and pains going in. And it's because I cross train. Now, what did my cross training look like? Because I know this is the nitty gritty that people want. I did it 6 days a week. So I had 1 or 2 days of cross training a week. That usually involved bike just because of the schedule with night, and I can't really, because I work so much, I can't go power hiking during the nighttime. So I mostly did the bike. And those workouts were, say, 15 minutes easy warm up, then 3 minutes at a cadence of 95 to 100. And if you look at a spin bike or any bike, you would know that 3 minutes of a nice lower pace. Repeat that 6 times. So you would, for 3 minutes, be max effort, RPE 910, as much as, and that can be achieved by increasing the resistance or the incline. Max effort, you're out of breath, you can't do any more. Recover for 2 minutes, do that again, and do that over and over and over. And that, by the time you're done, your cardio is, you're gasping for air and your legs are exhausted. And or you could do like intervals, 30 seconds of the fastest, hardest you can go with only 30-second recovery. Repeat that 14 to 16 times. So I'm talking a lot
That's
more.
hard.
And that is what I did. Those were my recovery days, my cross training days. So even though that it wasn't running, by the time, I would actually find running easier than cross training. I I would get out there and I'm like, "Oh, this is a lot. My legs don't feel like they do when I'm on the bike. This is easy." And that's when I realized that cross training is what can get me running this distance and this long, because I was so exhausted on that bike. I wasn't injured. Like, there's no impact. Don't get me wrong, there's no impact on my feet. But your quads, your hamstrings, your everything feels like you ran for hours and hours and hours with no impact. And then I would get to the ground and I would be like, "Oh, wow, this is easy." Like, I can't explain it unless it happens to you. That's the best way I can explain it to you. And that is why I am such a proponent of it, because I wouldn't have said it if I didn't do it myself. And it was what saved me. And most people are not going to be training 6 days a week, to be honest. 5 days is usually the max. But if you are training for a 24-hour race or a multiple day event, you need to train a lot more. But I don't want people to think that cross training can't help you if you're training for a half marathon or a 10K either. It can. You and we're gonna go into that a little later.
Yeah, and I I think your example is a great example. And honestly, if we had this conversation 6 months ago, it would be hard for me to even comprehend what you just said or even buy
I
in,
understand.
honestly, to what
I
you just
know.
said. But if those of you who have listened to episode 249 on the Healthy Runner podcast, where I shared kind of my 7 lessons learned during my latest injury recovery story, where I wasn't able to run for 6 weeks for the first time ever in my adult onset running journey. My coach programmed for me very strategically cross
Mhm.
training. And at first, not going to lie, the first time I had to get on a bike, I was like, this is terrible. I hate this. Like, this is not fun whatsoever. And then she did start programming
Mhm.
workouts in some quality sessions, like you had
That's key.
mentioned, and doing those intervals and, yeah, getting the legs to turn over at like 100, 110 RPM. You're getting that leg turnover, which, I started seeing the benefits. I definitely felt the difference in my legs. Like, my legs have never felt like that because it's really hard for even my legs to like get sore running, no matter how hard the workout is, just because I've done strength training consistently for like 30 years. So but doing the bike at like increasing the resistance and my legs would be like shot and my
Oh, yeah.
muscles would be like shot, and I'd feel like the lactic acid build up.
Yes.
And then even like when you get off of the bike and you start walking and you're like all wobbly and you're like, what the heck did I just do?
Yeah.
So yeah, I saw for myself firsthand how it can be beneficial from like that strength building standpoint that you mentioned in the muscles. But then yes, like also maintaining your cardiovascular fitness. Whether it is like in your example where you know your body isn't going to tolerate running 6 days a week, but you're able to still challenge the system, do some hard workouts, get your heart rate up, get it to recover, like work that VO2 max you were talking about, and your body thanked you for that, right? Like it really thanked you. And I think probably the big reason most people, when they really increase their running volume, they do get achiness on the side of their hips is because we're always on one foot, right? So like you're always getting those side hip muscles working, and a lot of times, sometimes you can get a little overuse, and you get a little like what we call gluteus medius tendinopathy. Some people will call it bursitis, but it's that muscle is being used a lot every single step we take as runners because we're on one leg during that time period. So yeah, I for the first time in my life, I firsthand saw the benefits of cross training. And even now that I've been back and I'm back up to like 30 miles per week running, my coach still has one day in
Yes.
the
I
plan
was gonna
of
ask, but
cross
I didn't want to
training.
embarrass you. I was like,
Yeah,
"Are you
no.
still adding the cross
We're
training because it
doing
will
we're
help
doing the
you?"
bike. Yeah, we're
Okay.
doing the bike. I wasn't
Good.
a fan of the elliptical much, I'm not gonna
Yeah, no.
lie.
I
And
I agree with
initially,
you.
yeah, initially I thought the elliptical would be great. And I guess it all depends upon like why someone is cross training, but going from like the physical therapist standpoint, if let's just say you had a lower extremity injury, you had a stress fracture, and you need to actually build up the forces
Mhm.
gradually in impact, then that would be like the next progression, right? You go from like non weight bearing, let's say on the bike and not even getting out of the saddle, like sitting the whole time, to maybe getting out of the saddle a little bit. And then maybe to an elliptical where you're in an upright position. So you're loading your bones, right? Like that would be a progression in kind of loading the bones. But it is really hard to get the heart rate up on the
Yeah,
elliptical.
it
And
is.
if you do,
I
you have to crank up the resistance so much where it's like you're going through literally like quicksand,
That's why I
right?
don't usually reference the elliptical as a cross training. I mean, I do know it has benefits, and if you like the elliptical, like I said, go for it because if you like it, do it. Um, I find the bike for me and the power hiking had more benefit than any of the other, but it's individual based.
Hmm. Yeah. And so you talked about from a recovery standpoint, it allowed you to do kind of your training. And I guess I'll add to that from like the injury standpoint. For me, like that was huge, right? For me to be able to recover, right, from like my foot injury and didn't apply the forces through it by using the bike, right? And then, I did test the waters with the elliptical. Like I said, I didn't like it a whole lot. Did a spinning class. When I got out of the saddle, like that actually was a little too much pain in my
Yes.
foot. So I
Yes.
was like, okay, I can't do a spinning class yet.
No.
So that was like a good check. And then I went back in like 3 weeks and then I was able to do it. So it can help recover from injuries as well, and or if someone is going through a painful spot. So like let's just take IT band syndrome for example. Someone who's struggling with IT band syndrome, you might think, okay, and I hear this a lot, which I don't necessarily love whatsoever. If someone's like 4 weeks out from their goal marathon, 3 weeks out from the goal marathon, and they're like, oh, I got IT band syndrome. I'm just going to like cross train the rest of the training so I can get to the race. Definitely not a fan of that option,
Yeah.
just because I think that's too much. And
Yeah.
sometimes, like something like the bike actually might irritate IT band syndrome as well. Or someone who has like proximal hamstring tendinopathy, like pain at the sit bone area, I get some people who that's irritated to sit and the pressure of sitting. So like it depends on the injury.
It
And
does.
I want,
And I
you guys
should
listening to this
go
to
ahead.
know like it might depend upon what injury you have, whether or not which form of cross training might be best for you.
Mhm.
Um, So keep that in mind as well. Just something to consider.
I do want to mention two things. One that, you know, cross training is not meant to replace your running. That's what I want, unless you're injured. But I want people to know that if you're running a race, you need to run. You need to train to run. You have to. You, I mean, there's no way around it. If you want to run a race, you have to train on the race. You have to run. This can be part of that running program. I don't want people to think that they can just sit on a spin bike and then they're able to run a marathon. No, 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 no. You have to do the running, but this will help. And in case anyone wants to know what get out of the saddle means, it just means standing from a sitting, if you're sitting on the bike, to standing up and pedaling upright. I just,
Thank you.
there's
Look
the
at
group,
that. I'm like
there's the group
the
fitness
guru now.
instructor. It's the group fitness instructor that is used to explaining every little detail to people. So that just means you're sitting on the bike and out of the saddle is the seat, you're standing up and you're pedaling while standing up, which can mimic running, and that's what my coach has me do, but it can be challenging. So just keep that in mind. All right.
Who would have thunk it that
I
Duane
know.
was actually the inside baseball, inside cross training lingo guy?
That made me
And
laugh when you said that. I almost had to drop. I was like, okay, wow, I'm
I
impressed.
was not riding a horse. I
No,
don't
that's the
horseback ride.
problem. I ride horses now. I do take horseback
Hey,
lessons.
that could be considered cross training. No, what do
Mm,
you say to that? No, because your
it,
heart rate isn't elevating.
well, it is if you're about to fall off, but sorry, I have some stories about that. That requires a lot of core strength and a lot of leg strength.
Right.
If you're a beginner like me, yeah, but let me tell you, your heart rate will get up there when you get up on a horse and you're afraid you're going to fall. That will elevate the heart rate in a not great way. I have some
Yep.
stories there. All right, anyway.
And Kat, no, let me just reiterate your point that you brought up because I thought it was a great point, and I get this a lot. And actually just literally onboarded a new athlete just before, and he has done some triathlons before, and
Yes, yes.
he just trained for an Olympic
Okay.
distance, and now he's segueing that into his marathon training for Miami Marathon,
That's what we're gonna
and
talk about later. Yeah.
I I had the conversation with him because he was still swimming twice a week, biking twice a
Yeah,
week,
no.
and we had to have the conversation of specificity of training, and that's kind of
Yes.
what you were alluding to before is like his main goal right now. And I said, okay, your main goal right now is the marathon, so we definitely
Yes.
want to make sure we're prioritizing your training for running, and we're going to utilize these other elements of
Yes.
cross training to enhance our recovery. And that's how I kind of explained it to him, as
Well,
you kind of mentioned before.
I have had 2 triathletes I work with that one did a sprint and one did an Olympic tri, which you don't need to worry about, but a triathlon is running, swimming is swimming, biking, running in different distances. And they then transitioned into running half marathons after. So, yes, we changed from running we were doing swimming, biking, running in about equal measures. We switched over to mostly running plan with one day, depending on what their goal was, of either swimming or biking, like a cross training day. But you do have to do the activity. You can't, you can't ride a bike and then run a marathon without ever running on the road. No matter what you want to do, it won't work.
Yeah, it's not the same. And there are some people who falsely get it, that misconception. It's almost like those that think training for a marathon, that they can split up their long runs and run eight
No.
miles in the morning and then run 10 miles in the evening for an
Oh
18
god.
miler. Like that,
Yeah,
no, that you've
no.
lost the benefits of
Yes.
that long run.
Yes.
And sometimes I get that misconception where someone's like, well, I'll just do 2 hours in the pool or 2 hours on the bike. It's not the same as 2 hours running. And if your
It really
main
isn't.
goal is to be able to run, then we need to make sure that we are having that specificity of training
Yep.
and actually, prioritizing the run as the
Yes.
main attraction in
Yes.
the weekly
Your main
plan.
event.
All right, let's talk mindset, because
Yes.
mindset is one of our 6 steps to growing in our running journey.
Mhm.
And there are some mental benefits of cross
Yes.
training, right? What are those?
Well, I I'm not so much bored when you go on a trail run because there's so many varieties, but my long runs still tend to be on a paved canal trail because if you're running for 5 or 6 hours, you don't want to be worrying about traffic. You want a pretty linear path. So, but I know that canal trail inside and out. And I run, I mean, 5, 6 days a week. My brain is like, okay, while I may like running, I am bored of running. I am bored. My brain just doesn't want to do it anymore. So when I have had the chance to start mixing it up, it was like, this is fun again. Running was fun again because there was a whole new element. Wow, I'm riding a bike. I'm power hiking, and then I get to run, and it was like fun again because you do, as runners, we fall into the same route, the same pace. We never, even if we're doing a speed workout or we're doing a long run, we tend to gravitate toward the same stuff. And that there's nothing wrong with it, but for me, my brain needs some different stimulation. And there's only so many times I can think, there's only so many things I can think about. So for me, it stopped that tedium and boredom that was, oh God, I got to run again. Even though you may like running, there's at any point in a training cycle, you're like, oh God, I got to get up and run. Oh God, I got to get up and run again. And you just don't want to do it. And part of that may not, maybe you're tired, but part of it may be you just want a variety. You want to mix it up a little bit. And that's where the cross training is like, whoo, I get to ride a bike again, or, oh, I get to go on the trail and power hike. And it breaks up your training cycle mentally as well as physically.
Yeah, and I would just add to that, going from my story of being in the quote unquote, on the DL or on the injured reserve list, it did
DL, yeah.
provide me the positive mental benefits of actually feeling like I still maintained fitness. I was still an athlete. I was still, working on my cardiovascular capacity. And for me, coming from more kind of the gym, rat kind of background, strength background, my cardio has always been my limiting factor. My breathing, my aerobic capacity has been my limiting factor, and never doing like, long duration sports as a kid. So it actually challenged me in a way mentally that, hey, this is like a new challenge for you, and you know what, it's going to kind of help focus on some of your weak points that you have right now, and what is the things that are preventing you from like growing in your running journey. So mentally that was like helpful for me, to maintain some of that kind of exercise mindset, and keep you active, really. Yeah, and the other thing with the paved canal trail, Cat, this morning, man, I could not be bored because there were deer flying across like
Oh,
crazy, and
oh,
now with the all of the leaves that we have down, and now they're all off the trees, so like you could see far into the
yeah.
woods, and I was, every time I heard leaves rustling, I was like, on high alert. And then, 9 times out of 10, there were squirrels.
The
But I was
squirrels will
like,
kill you.
I don't want a
By the way,
deer
the
to
squirrels
come
will kill you.
sprinting across and, take me out.
That'll happen. The squirrels will kill you first. Just telling you. I have
The
stories.
squirrels over the deer.
Oh yeah, they're evil. I love squirrels, but they have vicious. Their acorns will twist an ankle. They'll throw one down at you, and you'll twist it. They like wait for you, and then poof, and you almost twist your ankle. I'm telling you, those squirrels, they're working together. But that's in the whole. Again, people just don't ask.
And when I saw that
Marvel.
black bear,
I just have to mention, if anybody is a Marvel fan, Squirrel Girl. She was powerful. There's a reason. Okay, Marvel fans, just look that up. All right, I had to give a shout out at one point. Squirrel Girl.
you
Okay,
had to get a
I
Marvel
had to.
character reference in there.
I couldn't. But that's obscure. So if anybody, like I said, if anybody on this podcast does know who I'm talking about, yes, it is a candy cane pen. If anybody on the podcast does hear me and want say, let me know that you actually know who Squirrel Girl was. Okay, Side note. Anyway, go ahead.
You're just gonna get inundated with
Uh,
like DMs now.
that's fine. I can do that. I'm good with that.
um, all right. So we're talking about some, there are positive benefits here
Mhm.
from a physical aspect, a mental aspect, a recovery aspect. Can we get carried away here? Can we do too much cross training? Or
We
like how many times a week should a runner cross train? Like what does this look like?
we were talking about that a little bit before. Yes, you can over cross train, not from an injury standpoint, but from a not being prepared for your goal race
Mm.
standpoint. Cross train, you're probably not going to get injured from cross training just because the nature is you're trying to limit your impact. But if you are training for a half marathon or a marathon, I always suggest whether you're training 4 or 5 days a week, you only do 1 day of cross training. I did 2 days of cross training because I had 4 days of heavy duty running, and I'm talking miles on top of miles and strength training. So I had to do 2 days of cross training because of my schedule. But for the most part, if you talk to your coach, but if you're 4 days a week or 5 days a week, just add 1 day of heavy duty cross training because you do want to be prepared for your race. So
Hmm.
I don't think you can over cross train in terms of injury, but yes, you can over cross train in terms of preparation. And that's not to say that if one day, say you're in the middle of a training cycle and you just one day say, I don't want to run, well, then get on the bike and do the bike. I mean, that's fine too. You can always, if you absolutely need to, just pick a day to do that, but don't really do more than 1 day unless you check with your coach.
Okay. And that can be beneficial too when weather is bad, right? You have like
Yes,
snowstorm,
exactly.
right? Or a lightning storm. You've talked about that in the
Oh
past
God.
episodes for our summer safety running episode, where that could be beneficial, right? Where you are able to utilize that cross training. And should you utilize cross training and running on the same day?
You can. Again, this is going to really be heavily dependent on your goal. For me, again, because of my training and my goal, I sometimes had to train 2 times, 3 times. Like I would run, for example, 90 minutes on the flat canal trail. Okay. Then I would go back to my car. I would take a break and then I would do another 90 minutes of power hiking right next to the car. Then I would take a break and maybe do another hour back, of regular running. So, but that was for me. You can cross train
So
and
that's
run on this.
definitely an extreme scenario,
Right.
right? You can agree with that. Like the majority of
Yes.
your
You're
athletes
not
you're
going to,
working with, you
and I'm
wouldn't
putting
recommend
that
that.
out there to explain how then you can incorporate, both of those in 1 day if you want to do. You shouldn't break it up and do it in. I would not suggest you do running in the morning and cross training in the evening, unless you're really under the coach's guidance and they're suggesting that to you. But you can do both on the same day by say running for 15-20 minutes on a canal trail and then going over maybe to the bike if there's or on the if you're at the gym, do 15-20 minutes on a treadmill, 15-20 minutes on a bike. There you go. Or if you are on the canal trail, and I'm more than willing to take anybody with me, I don't know, they'll have to listen to me, but run for maybe 30 minutes on the flat pavement and come with me for a 20-minute walk hike around, and there's your cross training. And you'll see how you feel after. You will feel as tired as if you ran the full hour on a flat. You're going to feel more tired. So you can do it on the same day, but wouldn't split it up. And, you know, there is the mileage versus time scenario where I train mostly on time, where a lot of people train on mileage. And that can be a little tricky in a transition. So if you pick that, and what I do with my runners who love their mileage, they love their metrics, they love 5 mile, like I do all their regular running on mileage, but then that one cross train day I do by time. So they can have a 45-minute bike ride, and I will specifically outline what they're supposed to do in those 45 minutes. Or a 45-minute power hike and say, I need your heart rate here, here, and here. So that one day a week, you can do it for time because it's not going to equate exactly. Your miles on a bike is not going to equate to miles on a road. So if you are a die-hard mileage person, that one day of cross training should probably be based on time and probably no more than an hour. I would never give anybody more than an hour unless you are under, like I said, the guise of a coach. So that can look, like I said, for an hour cross training. Maybe you do want to do half hour of running. You're not willing to give that up. Go for it. But then the other half hour, push as hard as you can up hills on a trail. Not running. You don't want to run. So that's kind of how you can do it on the same day and how you can incorporate a time-based cross training day onto a mileage plan, which is very tricky for a lot of people because they're like, how do I replace a 5-mile run with the ride on the bike? Well, you can't. You just have to do it by time for the most part.
Right. So it sounds like you're utilizing it on the same day if you're kind of building someone out. Maybe
Yes.
they're either starting to get back into running after a long
Mhm.
layoff, or they are a novice runner, and that they're just not going to tolerate that much running impact. So you're
Yes.
using it on the same day to kind of enhance the cardiovascular benefit of the exercise. And I would agree with that. And where I've utilized it on the same day is kind of similar in like a return to run after an injury scenario, where someone is not going to tolerate, let's say their total running, maybe I'm doing structured run walk intervals with
Right.
them, is 20 minutes, 30 minutes, 40 minutes, but I still want to build up their aerobic capacity to 45 minutes total, 50 minutes total. So that's where I will recommend maybe the same day, but generally speaking, I would program cross training on like a
As a
strength
separate
day.
day. Yeah. And,
Yeah.
and make it a separate day because the purpose again is to take a day off of that high impact.
Mm-hmm.
Um So you like I said, put one day a week of cross training. And I do say that you could split it up in case people are really, really hesitant or resistant to that cross training mentality. They don't want to do it. Then you can add some of that running in there. But one day a week, whether you have a 4 or 5 day plan, even if you have a 3 day plan, I have to talk to the client, but a 4 or 5 day, replace it with one day.
Okay. And yeah, this is a common question that we get a lot. And I guess we may have already alluded to this already, but can I replace a run day with cross training?
Yes, as long as that cross training is highly cardiovascular based and not an easy an easy day. So what I mean by that is you want to do something that's going to get your heart rate up. You can go into a zone 4 or 5 if you're worried about that. A biking, it's not talking about taking a leisurely stroll down the road or even like I said before, the yoga or the Pilates. Those are all great. Don't get me wrong. I do those as well. But if it's going to replace a training day, it has to be a training day. It cannot be an easy day. And that's something I need to actually clarify. Cross training days are not meant to be easy days in terms of cardio. They may even be harder for you than running if you've been doing it long enough. They're not meant to be an easy day. They're just meant to take that load and to give you a little bit of a break from your training. But it will actually benefit your training if you add one day a week of that heavy duty cross training.
Yeah, and I would maybe the one caveat to that I would say is if um, you were injured and your running
Oh yeah.
volume was really low, like I mentioned before, and you do want to kind of extend out someone's aerobic capacity in like the
Yes.
zone two work. So
Yes.
that would be the only caveat I would add to what you just said there. And how about kind of the final stretch here as we
Okay.
come down the final stretch, if you could change one thing about the misconception about cross training, what would that be?
It would be that you should add it no matter what type of runner you are, what distance you're running. You should add it because it will make you a stronger and a faster runner, but it also will give you that mental, like, that just mental break. And there really isn't a negative in terms of physiological what will happen if you do it properly. Now, again, I program workouts specifically for my runners who cross train, and mine are trained. So if anyone ever has any questions, they're more than welcome, like I said, to just reach out to me and I'll give you an example. I have like a set of an example I give to everybody if they really want to know. Um, but, the misconception is that cross training should be used only when you're injured. No, it should be used to prevent injury and to make you a better runner. And I really, from personal experience, and it's worked with my clients, my triathletes who then transitioned, who were doing cross training as part of their plan. They've transitioned into half marathons and they've done amazing. And there's one person who comes to mind, I can't mention her name, but she did amazing, and she was a cross training pro with the triathlon. So, and she knows who she is.
Yeah.
So,
Shout
uh,
out.
shout out.
You know who you are.
You know who you are. So, I really do think it can help most runners no matter the distance.
Yeah. Oh man. And again, like I mentioned earlier, um, that was my misconception. It was until I actually experienced it. So I'm hoping really, Coach Cat kind of opened your eyes
I want to
to
put you
view
on the
this in
spot.
a. Oh, you want to put me on the spot? All right, let's do it. Let's do
All
it.
right. So, when you got back to running, like actual running on the road, were you surprised at how well your cardio held up from that cross training on the bike?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
I didn't mean to put you on the spot, but I
No.
think that would be the best way because you experienced it. It was you were able to go back. I looked at your distances
I
and I was like,
was.
he's back to running, without running
Yeah.
for how many months. So that should be in itself, a testament to what cross training can do.
And honestly, because I really focused on strength training with the cross training
Yes.
and working on my running form when I got back, I'm actually running. And not that this is a goal, but my easy pace is a little faster with keeping my heart rate in check. So if anything, I'm
VO2
actually a
max.
little bit more fit
VO2
than I
max.
was.
VO2
So
max. You were just proving everything on this whole podcast
yes,
I've been
yes.
trying to explain to people. I just made you tell that. That makes me very happy. You have no idea how happy that made me.
Yeah. So
Okay.
hopefully we opened people's eyes up to cross training, especially if you were like me and you were really skeptic. I would call
Yes.
myself a huge skeptic.
Yeah.
Is what I was prior to going through this myself. And just to kind of recap, guys, what we really talked about today is like what is considered cross training. We gave some examples of forms of cross training that you can do as a runner. We talked about, what equipment that you would be required or access perhaps to a gym. We talked about, is cross training a little different for road runners or trail runners? Kat gave those examples of kind of what trail runners would prefer. We talked about the benefits. We spent a good, amount of time talking about those physical benefits, the mental benefits, the recovery benefits from cross training. And then we talked about kind of how to implement it, like how many times per week. Is it the same as running? Should you replace it? Can you do too much? So hopefully, you guys have a little bit different perspective, perhaps, on cross training and see where it can fit into your overall goals as a runner. And if you really enjoyed this episode and you want to hear more from Coach Kat and some of her previous trainings, then you can check out the link that I'll have for you in the show notes where we have all of Coach Kat's kind of tips, insights. She's given talks on, running safety is a big one.
Hmm.
Summer running safety specifically as well.
Winter.
How to start running as a beginner. Excellent resource for you beginner runners who are just getting started. cold weather running as we're heading into, at the time of this recording,
Yay!
into the
Sorry.
cold weather season. Coach Kat gave some really great tips for cold weather months. Marathon mindset, which is always a great one that I share with all of my clients who are running a marathon, because that was helpful for me when I was running mine, that episode that you did. And then also even how to do a tempo run. So very eclectic. We did a trail running episode,
I
right?
was
Like,
gonna say,
yeah,
don't
very
forget my
eclectic.
trail run. But I do want to tell everybody, and I do say this: I do not post on social media. I have Instagram and I have Facebook. I don't post a lot, but I read every message that comes in. Anybody contacts me, even though you don't think I'm active, I monitor that daily. I will respond to you. So don't think that because I haven't posted in a while, I'm not on it. I am. I monitor all my communication constantly. So I just want to put that out there.
Kat is amazing at communication. And if you want to actually learn how to structure cross training, like we talked about, and all of this is like, you're like, wow, man, I really wish that I can actually have this structured out, because I have like a really busy life and I got kids at home and I don't really have time, and I don't have time to really figure all of this out. And you want to just take away the guesswork and you want to work with someone like Coach Kat on our team. You can simply do that and apply for a one-on-one signature coaching program, and she'll structure all of this out for you and really find out like what are the best forms of cross training for you and the run plan. And you will get our strength training for runners exercises to complement that, so you stay healthy and advance in your running journey. You can simply go to learn.sparkhealthyrunner.com/coaching, or you just click the link that I'll have for you in the show notes. Coach Kat, this has been amazing as always. It's always great catching up with you. And
It
yeah,
is.
thank you for all you do educating our running community.
I love it. I really do. I get very animated.
You do. I know. This is one like you had on the docket for a while. Like, guys, you don't understand. Coach Kat, like, she's been messaging me. She's like, oh my goodness, I got like all these
I
ideas.
know.
I have it all in my head already. And
I
yeah, this has
do.
been one we had in the
What do you
hopper
think I do
for
on
a
those
couple of
long
months.
runs?
It's a lot to think about.
There is. There's a lot of time. So, all
Yeah.
right.
And thank you guys as listeners for tuning in to today's episode. If this was helpful, you know someone who really might not be incorporating cross training as we talked about today, or maybe they need a little bit of wisdom and they need a little hope, and maybe they're going through an injury right now, and you're like, hey, you can actually maintain your fitness. Like, look, Duane did it actually. Send them this, copy the link wherever you're listening to this, send it to your friend. And if you like this training, then you'll surely like the next. If you're listening on the podcast, queue up episode 159 to learn all about how to grow as a runner in 6 easy steps, or just click the video I have for you if you're watching this on YouTube. As always, guys, let's maintain a strong mind, a strong body. Let's just keep on running and cross training.
Yay, cross training. I
Until next time.